Hey there, take a quick second to think about what's actually happening inside your body at this very moment. Beneath your skin, totally invisible to the naked eye, there is a massive, bustling, microscopic universe working tirelessly around the clock just to keep you breathing, thinking, and, well, alive. But what is the absolute smallest, fundamental unit that's driving all this incredible machinery? Welcome to our explainer on the secret life of cells. I am so pumped to take you on this trip today. We're going to zoom way, way out from our normal human scale, dive deep down into the incredible microscopic machinery that makes up every living thing on Earth, and then zoom all the way back out to see how it connects directly to you. Okay, here is our game plan for today. We'll hit the discovery of cells, compare plant and animal cells, meet the organelles, and wrap up with cell growth and division. Let's get right into it. Part 1. The discovery of cells from quarks to core theories. So our whole understanding of this hidden microscopic world actually kicks off way back in 1665. Before then, humanity honestly didn't even have a concept of the cell. Enter a scientist named Robert Hooke. He uses this really basic early microscope to look at a thin slice of cork. And when he looks through that lens, instead of just a solid piece of wood, he discovers this crazy, structured series of empty little compartments. Since they look so much like the tiny rooms monks lived in, or maybe the chambers in a beehive, he coined the term cells, a literal game changer. Well, that one peek through a lens totally opened the floodgates. Fast forward a bit, and scientists like Schleiden, Schwann, and Virchow started observing living tissues, eventually piecing everything together into what we now call the cell theory. It really boils down to three massive rules. First, the cell is the ultimate structural and functional unit of life. Second, every living thing, whether you're a massive blue whale or a tiny bacterium, is made up of one or more cells. And third, crucially, new cells don't just pop out of thin air. They always come from pre-existing cells.
All right, part 2, plant versus animal cells, a tale of two structures.
Now that we've got the basics down, let's zoom in a little further. If we compare the cellular blueprints of totally different living things, the contrast is actually pretty wild. Take human cheek cells, for example. Animal cells. They've got these soft, irregular, gelatinous borders. They look super fluid, almost like drops of spilled paint, right? But then look at onion peel cells, plant cells. Totally different story. They are highly organized, incredibly rigid, and honestly look like a microscopic brick wall. So why do they look so utterly different? Well, plants don't have skeletons, so their cells need a really tough cellulose cell wall just to keep the plant standing upright. Something we animal cells absolutely don't have. Plants also pack these massive central vacuoles to store water and maintain internal pressure, whereas animal cells just don't need those big storage tanks. And since plants literally cook up their own food using sunlight, they're loaded with chloroplasts. Again, animal cells, we just don't need them. Moving right along to part 3, meet the organelles, the cellular metropolis. Okay, let's dive into a typical animal cell. It is literally a bustling microscopic city in there. You've got these tiny, specialized internal structures called organelles, and they all perform a strict division of labor. But they aren't just rattling around. They're perfectly suspended within this jelly-like fluid called the cytoplasm. This fluid is super important because it holds the cell's shape and creates the perfect environment for all these metabolic processes to actually happen. Smack in the middle of all that cytoplasm is the big boss, the nucleus. Think of it as our cellular city hall. Wrapped in a protective nuclear envelope, the nucleus is constantly issuing orders and controlling every single activity in the cell. But more importantly, it acts as a high-security vault, locking away all your precious inherited genetic material right there in the chromosomes. But you know, City Hall needs workers, right? That's where the ribosomes come in. These are your cellular factories, tiny little guys with no membrane of their own. They take those direct genetic orders straight from the nucleus and use them as blueprints to churn out the essential proteins that literally keep you functioning. Once those proteins are made, they need a way to get around. Enter the ER, or endoplasmic reticulum. It's basically a massive microscopic highway system. We actually have two kinds. The rough ER, which looks rough because it's studded with those ribosome factories, making it the absolute perfect route for transporting newly made proteins. Then there's the smooth ER. It completely lacks ribosomes, and instead its main gig is synthesizing and moving lipids and steroids around. After cruising down the highway, all these materials eventually wind up at the Golgi complex. Honestly, imagine an Amazon fulfillment center. That's the Golgi. It's made of these stacked, membrane-bound sacs that take in raw substances, package them up nice and tight into little vesicles, and ship them off to wherever they're needed, whether that's somewhere else inside the cell or secreted completely outside of it.
But hold on, none of this microscopic industry, not the factories, not the highways, not the shipping centers, is going to run without power. That brings us to the absolute legend itself, the mitochondrion. You've probably heard it called the powerhouse of the cell, and for good reason. This oval-shaped organelle uses aerobic respiratory reactions to crank out the energy required to fuel absolutely all of this incredible metabolic activity.
All right, on to our final section, Part 4, Cell Growth and Division, Multiplying Life.
So let's zoom back out for a second. What happens when a cell gets to its maximum size? It can't just keep getting bigger forever. To survive and actually build complex life, it has to multiply. And to really ground this whole process in your own human reality, think about the number 46. That is the exact number of chromosomes packed into almost every typical cell in your body right now. That specific number dictates literally everything about your unique biological makeup.
But here's the cool part. Those 46 chromosomes aren't just a jumbled mess thrown into the nucleus. They are incredibly organized into 23 homologous pairs. For every single pair, you got one chromosome from your dad and one from your mom. It's a beautifully elegant setup, ensuring that all your family treats are perfectly packed up and ready to be transferred before the cell even thinks about dividing. Now, depending on what your body actually needs, cells use two totally different mathematical strategies to divide. On one hand, you've got mitosis, which is your body's standard copy machine. It maintains the exact same number of chromosomes to pump out identical daughter cells. On the other hand, you have meiosis, a super specialized division that purposely cuts the chromosome count right in half to form reproductive gametes. Let's connect this back to your everyday life. Mitosis is quite literally the mechanism keeping you functional every single day. When you hit a growth spurt, when your body swaps out old cells, or even when you're just healing up from that annoying paper cut you got yesterday, that is mitosis doing the heavy lifting. It perfectly duplicates your 46 chromosome cells over and over, keeping your tissues whole and healthy. Meiosis, on the flip side, is all about the future. It's the math of creating a totally new generation. By slicing that genetic material down to 23 chromosomes, let's call that N, it creates specialized eggs and sperms. Why? Because when they finally combine during fertilization, N plus N perfectly equals 2N. It is a biological magic trick, flawlessly restoring that total back to 46 and keeping the human species perfectly balanced. Okay, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to chew on this one mind-bending thought. Remember that third rule of the cell theory? That every single new cell absolutely must come from a pre-existing one? Well, if that's true, then every single active cell keeping you alive right now is just the latest link in an unbroken billion-year chain of continuous division. It's an ancient, epic legacy playing out inside you right this very second, just waiting to be explored further. Kind of makes you look at yourself a little differently, doesn't it?